It was late at night, and the neon lights of the nightclub flashed in a dizzying array of colors. The bass of the music pulsed through the air, making the ground vibrate beneath my feet. The dance floor was crowded with bodies, and the smell of sweat and alcohol mixed together in a heady scent. It was the kind of atmosphere where anything could happen, and I was ready for it. That's when I saw her, sitting alone at the bar like a beacon of light in the darkness. Her long blonde hair cascaded down her back in soft waves, and her bright blue eyes seemed to sparkle like diamonds. Her lips were painted a deep red, and she wore a dress that hugged her curves in all the right places. I couldn't resist striking up a conversation, and from the moment we started talking, I knew I had met someone special. We danced and laughed together, lost in the moment as the night flew by. It was as if time had stopped, and all that mattered was the music and the electricity between us. As the club started to empty out and the lights began to come up, I realized that I didn't want the night to end. It was like a dream come true, and I didn't want to wake up. As we walked back to my apartment, the cold night air wrapped around us like a blanket, sending shivers down my spine. Every step we took seemed to bring us closer to a world of unknown possibilities. The soft light of the street lamps flickered and cast shadows around us, giving her face a mysterious glow. I felt my heart pounding in my chest as I couldn't help but gaze at her in awe. Her beauty was mesmerizing, and yet there was something inexplicably unsettling about her. When we entered my apartment, I flicked on the lights, revealing the coziness of my small living room. I poured us each a drink, feeling the chill of the glass in my hand. We sat down on the couch, and as we chatted, I noticed a strange shift in the atmosphere. The air seemed to grow heavy, and the shadows around us became darker, as if closing in. A cold breeze brushed against my face, sending a shiver down my spine, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I tried to dismiss it as my imagination, but the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. Something was off, and I couldn't quite put my finger on what it was. Suddenly, I realized I was alone on the couch. I looked around, but she was nowhere to be found. As I stood up to look for her, I heard a noise coming from the bedroom. I cautiously made my way over, pushing the door open. The sight that greeted me was like something out of a nightmare. She was there, but she was no longer beautiful. Her eyes were black and empty, and her skin was pale and cold. She was crouched over the bed, tearing into the flesh of what appeared to be a corpse. I tried to scream, but my throat was dry. I stumbled backwards, tripping over my own feet and falling to the ground. She turned to look at me, her face contorted into a grotesque smile. I scrambled to my feet, my heart pounding in my chest like a hammer. My mind was racing, trying to figure out a way to escape. I lunged for the door, my hand shaking as I tried to turn the handle. But the door wouldn't budge. It was as if it had been sealed shut, trapping me inside with the horror that was unfolding before me. I turned around, and there she was, standing in the doorway to the bedroom. Her eyes were no longer the bright blue that had drawn me to her earlier. They were black and empty, like portals to some twisted dimension. Her skin was pale and cold, as if she had never seen the light of day, and her fingers, now long and bony, stretched out towards me like talons. I screamed for help, pounding on the door with all my might. But the only response was the sound of my own voice echoing through the empty apartment. And still she advanced, inching closer with each passing moment. Just when I thought it was all over, the front door burst open with a loud crash. A group of people rushed in, their faces contorted with anger and fear. They were armed with guns and knives, and they quickly surrounded the girl. It was like something out of a movie, but the terror that I felt was all too real. The group subdued her, wresting her to the ground with a strength that seemed almost inhuman. As the police arrived and took her away, I sat on the curb outside, my mind reeling with shock and disbelief. I had thought I had met the girl of my dreams, but I had never expected it to turn into a nightmare.
In the quiet town of Brooksville, 17-year-old Jack Thompson had always been a popular kid. He was known for his infectious laughter and easygoing personality, but he had a secret. Jack was terrified of the dark. He had never revealed this to anyone, not even his closest friends, for fear of ridicule. But that secret would soon come to light. On a chilly autumn night, Jack's friend, Mike, invited him to a party at his house. Mike's parents were out of town, and the word had quickly spread that the party would be one for the ages. Jack arrived at the party with a mix of excitement and unease. The house was old and had a certain eerie ambience, but Jack brushed it off, determined to have a good time. As Jack entered the house, he was greeted by his friends and the familiar smell of stale beer. The music was loud, and the lights were dimmed, casting strange shadows on the walls. Jack's unease started to grow, but he pushed it down, focusing on the festivities. As the night progressed, Jack found himself chatting with friends and enjoying the party, but the house seemed to have a life of its own. The floorboards creaked, and the wind whispered through the cracks, making Jack feel as if he were being watched. He tried to ignore the sensation, but it gnawed at the back of his mind. As the clock struck midnight, a power outage plunged the house into darkness. Panic seized Jack's chest, his heart pounding as the room filled with terrified screams. Mike fumbled for a flashlight, assuring everyone it was just a blown fuse. But Jack knew better. He could feel the darkness closing in, feeding off his fear. Jack's friends, eager to keep the party going, lit candles and placed them throughout the house. The flickering light added to the eerie atmosphere, and Jack felt the darkness pressing in on him. As he stumbled through the dimly lit rooms, he came across a door he hadn't noticed earlier. It was old, the paint peeling, and it seemed to call out to him. Unable to resist the strange pull, Jack opened the door and stepped inside. The room was small, the air heavy with a musty scent. Jack felt his breath catch in his throat, his fear mounting as he realized he was trapped in darkness. He fumbled in his pocket for his phone, the dim light from the screen offering little comfort. As Jack's eyes adjusted to the darkness, he noticed a dusty mirror hanging on the wall. In the faint light, his reflection looked distorted, as if his features were melting away. Jack stared, unable to tear his eyes away from the horrifying image. His heart raced, and his hands began to tremble. He felt an overwhelming urge to shatter the mirror, to destroy the terrifying image it held. But as he raised his fist, the reflection smiled, revealing a sinister grin that sent shivers down Jack's spine. Unable to bear the sight, Jack stumbled backward, his scream muffled by the pounding music. He scrambled to the door, desperate to escape the room and the malevolent presence within. He flung the door open, gasping for breath, and fled into the candlelit hallway. As Jack stumbled through the house, he realized that the darkness was no longer confined to the small room. It seemed to seep through the walls, wrapping its tendrils around him, choking him with its oppressive weight. His friends seemed oblivious to the encroaching darkness, their laughter and chatter drowned out by the frantic pounding of Jack's heart. In a desperate bid to escape, Jack made his way to the front door. He fumbled with the lock, his hands slick with sweat, and finally managed to wrench the door open. He stumbled out into the night, gasping for breath, the cold air a welcome reprieve from the suffocating darkness inside the house. Jack ran down the driveway, his heart pounding in his ears, and didn't stop until he reached the safety of his own home. He locked the door behind him, collapsing on the floor, his body racked with tremors. The terror of the night's events clung to him like a second skin, and he couldn't shake the feeling that the darkness had followed him home. Over the next few days, Jack's fear only intensified. He jumped at every sound, his sleep plagued by nightmares of distorted reflections and suffocating darkness. He began to avoid his friends, refusing their invitations to hang out, afraid that they would see the terror that gripped him. Jack's parents noticed his sudden withdrawal and became concerned. They tried to talk to him, but Jack refused to share his fears, terrified that they would think he was losing his mind. He felt more isolated than ever, trapped in a nightmare he couldn't escape. Days turned into weeks, and Jack's fear continued to grow. He felt the darkness lurking in the shadows, watching him, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. He began to see the sinister reflection in every mirror he encountered, its twisted smile mocking him, a constant reminder of the terror that gripped his soul. One night, as Jack lay in bed, his room bathed in the soft glow of his nightlight, he heard a faint tapping at his window. His heart leaped into his throat, and he squeezed his eyes shut, praying for the sound to stop. But the tapping persisted, growing louder and more insistent, until Jack could no longer ignore it. Summoning every ounce of courage he had left, Jack approached the window, his hands shaking as he drew back the curtains. The sight that greeted him stole the breath from his lungs. The sinister reflection from the mirror at Mike's house stood on the other side of the glass, its twisted grin wider than ever, its eyes devoid of any humanity. Jack stumbled back in terror, his scream dying in his throat as the reflection reached through the window, its icy fingers closing around his heart. At that moment, Jack knew that he could no longer run from the darkness. He had to face it head-on, or it would consume him entirely. Gathering his strength, Jack lunged at the reflection, shattering the window, and sending shards of glass flying. He grappled with the entity, feeling its icy grip loosening as he fought back with every ounce of his being. As the struggle continued, the reflection began to fade, its twisted smile replaced with a look of pure terror. With one final surge of determination, Jack tore the reflection from his chest, watching as it dissolved into the night. The darkness that had haunted him for so long retreated, leaving him gasping for breath and covered in sweat. Jack had faced his fears and conquered the darkness that threatened to consume him. He knew that the road to recovery would be a long one, but he was no longer alone. He had the support of his friends and family, and the knowledge that he had the strength to overcome even his deepest fears. In the end, the experience taught Jack the importance of facing one's fears and the power that comes from confronting the darkness within. The horror he had endured would remain a chilling reminder of the battle. He had fought and won, a testament to the strength of the human spirit. In the weeks that followed, Jack slowly started to rebuild his life. He reconnected with his friends, and the nightmares that had haunted his sleep began to fade. The more he faced his fears, the more control he regained over his life. The darkness that had once seemed so powerful and terrifying now seemed like a distant memory, a painful chapter in his life that he was determined to move past. Jack's parents noticed the change in their son and were relieved to see him regaining his confidence. They continued to support him, offering their love and understanding as he worked through the lingering remnants of his fear. One afternoon, while walking home from school, Jack passed by Mike's house. He hesitated for a moment, staring at the place that had once held so much terror for him. A small voice in the back of his mind whispered that the darkness was still lurking there, waiting for him to let his guard down. But Jack shook off the thought, refusing to let the fear control him any longer. He decided to visit Mike, to face the memories that haunted the old house. As he stood in front of the door, Jack took a deep breath and knocked. Mike opened the door, a surprised but welcoming smile on his face. "Hey, Jack, it's been a while." "Come on in," Mike said, stepping aside to let Jack enter. Jack stepped into the house, and as he did, he realized that it no longer held the same eerie atmosphere that had once terrified him. It was just a house, filled with memories both good and bad, but no longer a place of fear. As Jack and Mike caught up, Jack felt the weight lifting from his shoulders. He knew that he would always carry the scars of his experience, but he had come to accept them as a part of who he was. They served as a reminder of the strength he possessed and the darkness he had overcome. Years passed, and Jack's life continued to improve. He graduated high school and went on to attend college, pursuing his dreams and making new friends along the way. The darkness that had once consumed him was now a distant memory, a part of his past that had shaped him into the person he had become. Jack would occasionally share his story with others, hoping that it might help someone facing their own darkness. He had learned that there is power in facing one's fears, and he was determined to help others find the strength to overcome their own demons. The horror he had experienced would always be a part of him, but Jack refused to let it define him. Instead, he chose to use it as a reminder of the resilience of the human spirit and the power that comes from facing the darkness head-on. And as Jack moved forward in life, he did so with the knowledge that he was stronger than any fear that might come his way. Hannah, a college student, was excited about attending the annual Halloween party organized by the university's most popular fraternity. She was looking forward to dressing up and letting loose with her friends for a night. Little did she know that the night would take an unexpected and sinister turn. The fraternity house was a massive, old Victorian-style mansion with a dark history. Rumors circulated that the house was haunted, and that tragic events took place within its walls. Some claimed to hear strange noises and feel cold spots, while others dismissed these stories as mere superstition. Regardless, the house provided the perfect eerie backdrop for a horror-themed party. Hannah and her friends had spent weeks planning their costumes. She had chosen to dress as a creepy Victorian ghost, her white gown and face paint contrasting with her jet black hair. Her friends Lisa and Sarah dressed as a witch and a zombie, respectively. The trio looked as if they had stepped straight out of a horror movie. Upon arriving at the party, they were greeted by the sound of pulsating music, laughter, and animated conversations. The house was elaborately decorated, with cobwebs, skeletons, and dim, flickering lights setting the mood. Students in costumes danced, drank, and reveled in the chilling atmosphere. Hannah, Lisa, and Sarah mingled, sipping on their drinks and enjoying the festivities. As the night wore on, the house became more crowded, and Hannah felt a strange sense of unease creeping over her. She couldn't quite put her finger on it, but felt the need to step outside for a moment to clear her head. While standing alone on the front porch, the cold night air causing goosebumps on her skin, Hannah noticed a group of students gathered around a bonfire in the front yard. Among them was a guy she recognized as Tyler, a senior she had met in her literature class. He was dressed as a dashing, albeit undead, pirate. Hannah and Tyler exchanged glances, and he approached her, a knowing smile playing on his lips. "I see you've discovered our little gathering," he said, offering her a cup of warm cider. "Care to join us?" Hannah hesitated, glancing back at the party inside. She decided that a short break wouldn't hurt, so she accepted the cup and joined the circle around fire. The group was engaged in a game of storytelling, each person taking turns sharing a frightening tale. The stories ranged from the classic campfire variety to those based on real events. As the game continued, the stories grew darker and more unsettling. Hannah, thoroughly engrossed, hardly noticed when Lisa and Sarah emerged from the house to join her. The two friends exchanged worried glances but didn't interrupt the storytelling. Finally, it was Tyler's turn. He began his tale in a low, haunting voice, recounting the story of a student who had once lived in the fraternity house. The student, tormented by a secret he couldn't escape, had turned to the occult to find solace. One night, during a Halloween party much like this one, he had performed a ritual in an attempt to summon a dark entity. The ritual had gone horribly wrong, and the student vanished, leaving behind only a blood-stained room. The group, now silent and uneasy, listened as Tyler continued. The student's body was never found, but it was rumored that his tormented spirit remained in the house, seeking vengeance. As Tyler finished his story, a gust of wind blew through the yard, causing the fire to flicker and sending shivers down everyone's spine. Unnerved, Hannah suggested they head back inside. As they re-entered the house, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The party seemed to have taken on a more sinister tone, the once lively atmosphere now heavy with tension. She tried to ignore her growing sense of dread, telling herself it was just the effect of the stories they had shared. As the night progressed, strange occurrences began to happen. Objects seemed to move on their own, doors slammed shut, and whispers echoed through the darkened halls. Some partygoers laughed it off, attributing the bizarre happenings to their intoxicated state or to clever pranks. But Hannah couldn't shake the feeling that something more sinister was at play. Her anxiety peaked when she stumbled upon a locked door in a secluded corner of the house. The door was old and weathered, its paint peeling and the wood splintered. There was an air of foreboding about it that sent a chill down her spine. Despite her better judgment, she felt inexplicably drawn to the door, as if it was calling to her. Unable to resist her curiosity, Hannah asked Tyler about the mysterious room. His face paled, and he hesitated before reluctantly revealing that it was the very room where the ritual had taken place years ago. He warned her not to venture inside, explaining that it had been sealed off to protect the fraternity members. from the malevolent energy that still lingered within. But as the party continued, Hannah's fascination with the room only grew stronger. With each passing moment, she felt an increasing compulsion to open the door and uncover the secrets hidden within. Finally, unable to resist the pull any longer, she stole the key from Tyler's room and made her way back to the locked door. Her heart raced as she inserted the key and turned the lock. The door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit room shrouded in dust and cobwebs. The air was thick with a sense of darkness and despair that seemed to consume her. At the center of the room, a circle of black candles surround a pentagram drawn on the floor, the remnants of the ill-fated ritual. As Hannah stepped into the room, she felt a wave of terror wash over her. She realized too late that she had made a terrible mistake. The door slammed shut behind her, trapping her inside. Desperate, she tried to escape, but the door refused to budge. Suddenly, an eerie voice echoed through the room, its whispering tone sending shivers down her spine. It was the vengeful spirit of the student who had vanished all those years ago. He had been waiting for someone to release him from his prison, and now that Hannah had unwittingly set him free, he intended to exact his revenge on the living. The spirit revealed its plan to possess Hannah, using her as a vessel to unleash chaos and destruction upon the unsuspecting partygoers. Powerless to resist, she felt the malevolent entity take control of her body, forcing her to act as its puppet. As the spirit wreaked havoc on the party, Hannah's friends banded together to save her. They desperately searched for a way to banish the vengeful spirit and free Hannah from its grasp. Through their research, they discovered a counter-ritual that could potentially sever the spirit's connection to the mortal world. With time running out, they performed the ritual, hoping against hope that it would work. As they chanted the ancient words, a blinding light filled the room, and Hannah felt the spirit's hold on her weaken. With one final agonizing scream, the spirit was ripped from her body and vanished into the ether. Hannah collapsed, exhausted and traumatized by the night's events. Her friends rushed to her side, relieved that their efforts had succeeded. They embraced her, tears streaming down their faces as they rejoiced in her rescue. The party quickly came to an end as the shaken and traumatized students dispersed, eager to leave the haunted house behind. The fraternity brothers, now fully aware of the sinister energy lurking within their home, vowed never to hold another Halloween party there. Hannah, grateful to have survived the ordeal, found herself unable to forget the terrifying events that had transpired. Instead of moving on, she became obsessed with understanding the supernatural forces that had nearly claimed her life. Her studies shifted towards the paranormal and the occult, and she spent countless hours researching ancient rituals and hauntings. Meanwhile, the fraternity house's reputation grew darker and more menacing. Students began to avoid the house, and whispers of mysterious occurrences spread across the campus. The fraternity brothers, desperate to rid themselves of the malevolent energy, reached out to Hannah for help. Hannah agreed to investigate the house further, hoping to uncover a way to cleanse it of the lingering darkness. She enlisted the help of her friends Lisa and Sarah, who had been with her on that fateful night, and the trio began to delve deeper into the house's sordid history. Their research revealed that the property had once belonged to a powerful witch who had been betrayed and executed by the townspeople. In her final moments, she had cursed the land, condemning it to be a beacon for dark forces throughout time. The students' ritual had not only unleashed the vengeful spirit, but had also amplified the curse, making the house a nexus for supernatural activity. Determined to break the curse and restore peace to the house, Hannah and her friends sought out a reclusive medium with a reputation for banishing malevolent entities. The medium, a mysterious woman named Madame Delphine, agreed to perform a powerful cleansing ritual on the fraternity house. As they prepared for the ritual, the house's supernatural activity intensified. Apparitions appeared, objects levitated, and blood-curdling screams echoed through the halls. Undeterred, Hannah, Lisa, Sarah, and Madame Delphine pressed on, aware that their efforts were their only hope for salvation. The night of the ritual arrived, and the four women gathered in the house's cursed room. As Madame Delphine chanted ancient incantations, the air grew heavy, and the temperature plummeted. The house seemed to come alive, its walls trembling and groaning as if in pain. The malevolent forces within fought back, desperate to maintained their grip on the accursed building. In the climactic moment, Hannah felt the energy in the room shift. The darkness that had weighed so heavily on the house seemed to dissipate, replaced by a newfound sense of peace and tranquility. The curse had been lifted, and the house was finally free from its dark legacy. In the aftermath of the ritual, the fraternity house was transformed. The strange occurrences ceased, and the once ominous atmosphere was replaced with a sense of warmth and welcome. Grateful for Hannah's intervention, the fraternity brothers dedicated themselves to ensuring that their home remained a place of light and positivity. As for Hannah, her experiences in the fraternity house had irrevocably altered her life's path. While the night of the Halloween party would forever haunt her memories, she knew that it had set her on a journey she could never have anticipated.
One Friday night, I walked into the club, the bass thumping through my body as I made my way to the bar. I had just come off a long week at work, and I needed to let loose. I ordered a drink, and the bartender slid it to me. The smell of the liquor was overwhelming, but I needed it. As the night went on, I lost track of time and how much I had been drinking. I stumbled onto the dance floor, my head spinning. The strobe lights made it difficult to see anything, and the music was so loud it was like a physical force pressing against me. That's when the weird things started to happen. The people around me began to blur together, and I couldn't tell who was who. I started to feel like I was in a different world, one that was dark and twisted. I saw shadows moving in the corners of my vision, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. My heart raced as I stumbled through the crowd, trying to find my way out. Suddenly, the thumping music stopped, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. The flashing strobe lights flickered and died, plunging the entire club into complete darkness. My heart leaped into my throat as I fumbled blindly for something to hold onto. My breathing became heavy and panicked as I realized that I was completely alone in the black void. That's when I felt it, a cold, clammy hand on my shoulder, making me jump out of my skin. I spun around, but no one was there, and yet the hand was still there, gripping me tightly like a vice. The hand felt foreign and sinister, and I could feel my heart racing as adrenaline coursed through my veins. I was sure that I was not alone in this club. I opened my mouth to scream, but no sound escaped my lips. The only noise was the pounding of my pulse in my ears, threatening to drown out everything else. I felt like I was trapped in a nightmare with no escape. I was in a cold sweat, my eyes darting around frantically in search of a way out. But the thing that had its grip on me was strong, and it was clear that it wanted to hurt me. The lights flickered back on, and I gasped at what I saw. The club was now completely empty, devoid of any sign of life. No people, no music, and no bartenders. The only thing that remained was the thing that had touched me, and it was now standing before me, basked in an eerie glow. The creature was unlike anything I had ever seen before. It was tall and thin, with elongated limbs and fingers that ended in sharp claws. Its skin was a sickly green color, and its eyes were large and glowing in the dim light. It had no discernible features, just a mouth filled with razor-sharp teeth that seemed to grin at me with malice. I took a step back, but the creature mirrored my movement, advancing towards me with slow, deliberate steps. Its hand was still wrapped tightly around my shoulder, and I could feel cold sweat on my skin. I knew I had to get out of there, but my legs were frozen, refusing to move. The creature leaned in closer, its putrid breath washing over me in waves. I could feel its cold breath on my neck, and the panic was almost too much to bear. I closed my eyes and prayed for it to be over, but when I opened them again, the creature was gone, and the club was empty once more. I took a deep breath and bolted towards the exit, desperate to escape the horrors I had just witnessed. I stumbled towards the exit, my heart racing, and pushed the door open. As soon as I stepped out into the cool night air, everything was normal again. The street was bustling with people, and the sounds of the city filled my ears. I never went back to that club again, The memory of that night was burned into my mind, a reminder of what can happen when you drink too much and let your guard down.
It was a hot summer night and I was out at the club with my friends. The music was blaring, the lights were flashing, and the crowd was packed. I was having a great time dancing and chatting with my friends, but then I noticed something strange. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed a tall, muscular man with short, spiky hair standing near the edge of the dance floor. His dark, intense eyes seemed to be fixed on me. At first, I thought it might just be a coincidence or my imagination, so I tried to ignore it and focus on dancing with my friends. However, as the night went on, the man's gaze never left me. Every time I looked around, I saw him still staring, as if he was studying me, trying to figure me out. As I continued to dance, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It was as if his eyes were piercing through my skin, and I started to feel like he was following me around the club. I began to feel uneasy, and my heart started pounding in my chest. I tried to brush it off and tell myself that I was just being paranoid, but the feeling of being watched only grew stronger. I started to get the sense that he was waiting for the right moment to approach me, and that sent chills down my spine. I turned to my friends and pointed out the man who had been staring at me. They looked over and saw him, but they didn't seem to think it was a big deal. They laughed and joked about how I must have a secret admirer. I tried to explain that his gaze made me uncomfortable and that I felt like he was following me, but they just brushed it off and told me to relax and have fun. As the night wore on, I continued to feel uneasy, and the man's presence seemed to be everywhere I turned. I started to feel like I was being paranoid, but something about the way he looked at me made me feel like he was up to no good. I tried to keep dancing and having fun, but my anxiety only grew stronger. I wished my friends would take me seriously and help me get out of there, but they were too caught up in the excitement of the night to notice my distress. I decided to take a break from dancing and sit down at the bar. I thought that being around more people would make me feel safer, but when I looked up, I saw the same guy standing only a few feet away from me, still staring at me with that cold, intense gaze. My heart raced as I tried to think of what to do. I knew I had to get out of there, but I didn't want to leave my friends behind. I looked around for them, but they were nowhere to be found. Panic set in as I realized that I was alone with the stranger. I tried to push past him and make my way to the exit, but he grabbed my arm and pulled me back. "Come with me," he whispered, his voice low and menacing. I screamed and struggled, but he was too strong. He dragged me towards a dark corner of the club, and I knew that this was it. I was going to die. But just then, my friends appeared out of nowhere, and they rushed to my rescue. They fought off the stranger, and we all ran out of the club as fast as we could. As we stumbled out onto the street, I looked back at the club and saw the stranger standing in the doorway, watching us with that same cold, intense gaze. I knew that I had narrowly escaped a terrible fate, and I shuddered to think what might have happened if my friends hadn't been there to save me. From that day on, I never went back to that club again, and I always made sure to watch my back in crowded places. The memory of that night will haunt me forever, and I will always be grateful for my friends who saved my life.